She was just a teacher who defended a mute student everyone bullied. She didn't know his guardian was a mafia boss. Now the most dangerous man in the city won't let anyone touch her, including the powerful families who want her silenced. The paper airplane hit Mateo's head just as Elena walked into her classroom. She froze in the doorway, her stack of graded essays nearly slipping from her hands. The boy didn't flinch. He sat perfectly still at his desk in the back corner, his dark eyes fixed on the whiteboard as if nothing had happened. Around him, 3 students, Brandon Chun, Madison Pierce, and Tyler Morrison, whispered and snickered behind their hands. "All right, settle down," Elena said, forcing her voice to stay steady as she set her papers on the desk. But she'd seen it. She'd seen everything. This was Mateo's 3rd day at Roosevelt Preparatory Academy, and Elena had already noticed the pattern. The 16-year-old transfer student ate lunch alone. He arrived early and left late. And every time she looked his way, those same 3 students were watching him like wolves circling prey. The morning lesson began with a discussion on To Kill a Mockingbird. Elena tried to focus, tried to lead her students through Atticus Finch's closing argument, but her attention kept drifting to the back corner. Mateo took notes carefully, his handwriting neat and precise. He never raised his hand. He never made a sound. Because he couldn't. Mateo was mute, a fact that apparently made him the perfect target. 20 minutes into class, Elena asked students to break into discussion groups. "Talk about the theme of moral courage," she said. "What does it mean to stand up for what's right when everyone else stays silent?" The irony wasn't lost on her. As students rearranged their desks, Elena watched Brandon deliberately push his backpack into the aisle, right where Mateo would have to step. The boy saw it, hesitated, then carefully walked around it. Madison and Tyler burst into exaggerated laughter. "Something funny?" Elena asked sharply. "No, Ms. Rodriguez," Madison said sweetly, her diamond earrings catching the fluorescent light. "Just discussing the book." Elena's jaw tightened. These kids came from money, real money. Their parents owned half the businesses in town and all of the school board seats. They were untouchable, and they knew it. But Mateo wasn't looking at them. He was looking at his desk, where someone had scratched something into the wooden surface while Elena's back was turned. "Freak." Elena's blood went cold. "Everyone eyes up here," she announced. "Actually, you know what? New assignment. We're going to talk about bullying in Mockingbird. How Scout and Jem face it. How Boo Radley faces it." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the room. "How it destroys people when good people do nothing." Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Ms. Rodriguez," Madison said, her voice dripping with false concern, "are we going to have time to finish the chapter questions? My mom said this class needs to stay on curriculum." "Your mom doesn't teach this class," Elena interrupted. "I do." The room went silent. For the next 30 minutes, Elena taught the most passionate lesson of her career. She talked about courage, about standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves, about how silence made you complicit. Several students nodded along. A few glanced at Mateo with something like guilt in their eyes. But Brandon, Madison, and Tyler just stared at her with barely concealed contempt. When the bell rang, students filed out quickly, eager to escape the tension. Elena noticed Mateo packing his bag slowly, methodically. As he stood to leave, Brandon's backpack accidentally fell open, spilling books and papers across the floor directly in Mateo's path. "Oh man, I'm so clumsy," Brandon said loudly. "Hey, Mateo, since you're right there, could you help me pick these up?" Mateo stood frozen. "He asked you a question," Tyler added, smirking. "Oh wait, that's right, you can't answer." "Enough," Elena snapped, striding down the aisle. "Brandon, pick up your own things." Tyler, Madison out.
"Now."
"We were just," Madison started. "Out." The 3 students exchanged glances, then left, their designer shoes clicking against the linoleum. But Elena heard Tyler's voice in the hallway. "That poor bitch teacher is as pathetic as the mute freak." Laughter echoed down the corridor. Elena's hands shook as she turned to Mateo. The boy stood perfectly still, his backpack gripped in white-knuckled hands. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the dark circles under his eyes. This wasn't just 3 days of bullying, this was something deeper, older. "Mateo," she said softly, "look at me." Slowly, those dark eyes met hers. "You don't deserve this. You understand? None of this is your fault." She pulled out her phone. "I'm documenting everything I saw today. I'm filing a report with the principal. This stops now." Mateo's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes.
Surprise, maybe.
Or disbelief, like he'd heard these promises before and watched them crumble. Elena crouched down and picked up one of Brandon's scattered notebooks, then handed it to Mateo. "You don't have to clean up their messes. Not anymore." For the first time, Mateo's face softened. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small notepad, and wrote something quickly before showing it to her. "Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. But it won't matter. It never does." Elena's heart broke and hardened simultaneously. "We'll see about that," she said. 2 hours later, Elena sat in Principal Whitmore's office, her detailed bullying report on his desk. The principal, a balding man in his 50s, barely glanced at it. "Elena, these are serious accusations against some of our most prominent families. These are serious actions against a vulnerable student," Elena countered. "Brandon's father just donated $50,000 for new computers. Madison's mother is on the school board. Tyler's family has been with this school for 3 generations," Whitmore sighed. "I'm sure it was just teenagers being teenagers. Kids tease each other. It builds character. Carving freak into someone's desk builds character? I'll talk to them," Whitmore said dismissively, filing her report into his desk drawer. "But Elena, word of advice? Pick your battles. This school runs on relationships. Don't make enemies you can't afford." Elena left his office with her hands trembling, not from fear, but from rage. That night, in her small apartment with its cracked ceiling and second-hand furniture, Elena opened her laptop. She started a new document. Bullying incident log, Mateo Rossi. She wrote down everything she'd seen, times, dates, witnesses. If the school wouldn't protect him, she would. She didn't know that decision would change everything. She didn't know that Mateo's last name wasn't just Rossi. And she definitely didn't know that his guardian was watching. The conference room smelled like expensive perfume and old money. Elena sat alone at one end of the long mahogany table, her printed evidence stacked neatly before her. At the other end, 5 board members sat like judges. Behind them, Brandon's father, a real estate developer in a tailored suit, whispered to Madison's mother, who wore pearls that probably cost more than Elena's annual salary. Principal Whitmore cleared his throat. "Ms. Rodriguez, you requested this emergency meeting. The floor is yours." Elena stood, her cheap blazer suddenly feeling inadequate. "Thank you. I'm here because the bullying report I filed 2 days ago was dismissed without investigation. Since then, the harassment of Mateo Rossi has escalated." "Harassment is a strong word," interrupted Mrs. Pierce, Madison's mother. Her voice was ice. "Children have conflicts. It's part of growing up." "Is carving slurs into a student's desk part of growing up?" Elena pulled out her phone, showing photos she'd taken. "Is stealing his belongings? Blocking him in hallways? Making him eat lunch in the bathroom?" She'd spent 2 days gathering evidence. Timestamps. Witness statements from students brave enough to speak anonymously. Security footage requests that Whitmore had lost. Mr. Chun, Brandon's father, leaned forward. "Ms. Rodriguez, my son says you've created a hostile environment in your classroom, that you've singled out certain students and singled them out for bullying another student." Elena cut in. "Yes, I did. And I'd do it again." The room erupted. Board members talked over each other. Tyler's grandmother, a woman who'd endowed an entire wing of the school, slammed her hand on the table. "This is defamation. Mrs. Pierce shrieked. You're accusing our children of crimes. I'm documenting the truth. You're a second-year teacher with a savior complex, Mr. Chen said coldly. This school doesn't need troublemakers. We have standards to maintain, donors to consider. What about the students? Elena's voice shook. Don't they matter? Some students matter more than others, someone muttered. Elena's face flushed. Are you seriously saying that out loud? Whitmore raised his hands. Let's all calm down. Ms. Rodriguez, I think what the board is trying to say is that your teaching style may not be the right fit for a Roosevelt prep. Perhaps a public school environment would better suit your passion. You're threatening to fire me for protecting a student. We're suggesting, Mrs. Pierce said with a razor-sharp smile, that you reconsider your approach. Or will reconsider your employment. We have lawyers, Ms. Rodriguez. Very good lawyers. Can you afford the same? The threat hung in the air like poison. Elena opened her mouth to respond, but the conference room door opened. Everyone turned. The man who walked in commanded attention without saying a word. Tall, maybe 40, with silver threads in his dark hair and a presence that made the room feel smaller. His suit was immaculate, not flashy, but custom-made, the kind you only saw in movies. Two men in dark clothing flanked him, remaining by the door. Apologies for the interruption, he said, his voice smooth and quiet. I was told there was a meeting about my ward. Whitmore stood so quickly his chair scraped. Mr. DeSantis. We didn't expect. We weren't informed you'd be attending. DeSantis. Elena's stomach dropped. She'd heard that name before. Everyone in the city had. Whispered in news reports. Connected to waterfront developments that went through mysteriously fast. Restaurants that never seemed to close despite being empty. The kind of name that made police chiefs retire early. This was Mateo's guardian. I make it a policy to attend meetings about my family, Luca said, taking a seat directly across from Elena. His dark eyes swept the board members, and she watched them shrink. Please continue. I'm simply here to listen. The confident accusations died in everyone's throats. Mrs. Pierce recovered first. Mr. DeSantis, I assure you, we're handling this situation with the utmost care. Ms. Rodriguez has made some unfounded claims about student interactions, and we're simply addressing unfounded. Luca's voice remained soft, but something in it made Mrs. Pierce stop talking. You're saying my ward hasn't been bullied? Teenagers have disagreements, Mr. Chen said carefully. But bullying is such a harsh term. I'm sure Mateo is just adjusting to a new school. These things take time. How much time? Luca asked. How much time should a child spend being tormented before adults intervene? Silence. Elena stared at this man, this dangerous man, who was now defending Mateo with the same arguments she'd been making. Luca turned to her. Ms. Rodriguez, you filed the report. Yes, sir. Why? The question caught her off guard. Because it was the right thing to do. Something flickered in his expression, respect, maybe, or surprise. He turned back to the board. I've heard enough. Clearly, this institution has failed in its duty to protect students. I'll be conducting my own investigation. That won't be necessary, Whitmore said quickly. We have protocols. Your protocols protected bullies over a child who can't speak for himself. Lucas stood, buttoning his jacket. I'll be in touch with the superintendent. And my lawyers will review Roosevelt Prep's anti-bullying policies in detail. He walked toward the door, then paused. Ms. Rodriguez, a moment. Elena's heart hammered as she followed him into the empty hallway. The board members' panicked whispers faded behind the closed door. Up close, Luca DeSantis was even more intimidating, not because he postured or threatened, but because he didn't need to. Thank you, he said simply. Elena blinked. For what? For defending him. Mateo didn't tell me about any of this. Something like pain crossed his face. He's learned not to expect help. Mr. DeSantis, I'm just doing my job. No, his dark eyes held hers. Most people do their jobs by looking the other way. You chose differently. He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to her. If there are any further incidents, or if they retaliate against you, call me directly. Elena looked at the card. Just a name and a phone number, embossed in silver. I appreciate the offer, but I can handle. Ms. Rodriguez, his voice was quiet but firm. You just made enemies of very powerful people. They'll come for you now. Please take the card. She did, her hands trembling slightly. As Luca walked away, his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway, Elena realized two things. First, she'd just been pulled into something far bigger than a school dispute. And second, she had absolutely no idea what she'd gotten herself into. Elena returned to teaching like nothing had happened. What else could she do? Bills didn't stop coming just because you'd challenged powerful people. So she stood in front of her classroom the next morning, teaching Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, trying not to think about the board meeting or the dangerous man who'd defended her. Matteo sat in his usual back corner, but something was different. He looked lighter somehow, like a weight had lifted. When their eyes met, he gave her a small nod. Elena smiled back, then noticed Brandon's empty seat. And Madison's. And Tyler's. Are they sick? Someone whispered. I heard they got sent to the principal's office, another student murmured. Elena continued her lesson, but her mind raced. What had Luca done? She wouldn't find out until much later how much. Across town, Mr. Chen sat in his corner office overlooking the harbor, staring at his computer screen in disbelief. The email from the city's planning commission was brief and devastating. Your bid for the Harbor Point development project has been rejected. All permits currently under review will require additional environmental assessments. Estimated delay, 18 to 24 months. Harbor Point was his golden goose. $20 million in projected profits. He'd greased every wheel, called in every favor. The approval was supposed to be a formality.
His phone rang.
His lawyer. Richard, what the hell is happening? The commission just revoked our fast-track status. I don't know, Mr. Chen said, his voice tight. Find out who's behind this. But deep down, he already knew. Mrs. Pierce's afternoon was going no better. Her interior design firm had built its reputation on exclusive clients, old money families who paid premium prices for discretion and taste. She'd just landed her biggest contract yet, redesigning 3 floors of the Meridian Hotel. Had landed. I'm sorry, Mrs. Pierce, the hotel manager said over the phone, his voice apologetic but firm. The ownership group has decided to go in a different direction. They're terminating the contract effective immediately. We have a signed agreement with a 30-day termination clause, which we're exercising. You'll receive full payment for work completed, but we won't be needing your services going forward. Who's replacing us? A pause. I'm not at liberty to say. Mrs. Pierce hung up and immediately called 3 other clients to reassure them. All 3 went to voicemail. By evening, 2 had left messages canceling upcoming projects. No explanations.
Just
cancellations. Her husband found her in her home office at midnight, staring at spreadsheets. What's wrong? I don't know, she whispered. But we're hemorrhaging clients. Tyler's grandmother, Dorothy Morrison, was tougher than the others. She'd survived 3 recessions, 2 market crashes, and 1 nasty divorce. She didn't scare easily. But the letter from her bank made her hand shake. Dear Mrs. Morrison, after a routine review of your commercial loan portfolio, we regret to inform you that your accounts have been flagged for compliance investigation. All lines of credit are frozen pending review. This process typically takes 90 to 180 days. 90 days? Her restaurants ran on cash flow. She had payroll in 2 weeks. Vendors to pay. Leases due. She called her banker, a man she'd known for 20 years. Dorothy, my hands are tied. The order came from corporate. Someone requested a full audit.
Who?
I can't say. But whoever they are, they have serious weight. Dorothy hung up and poured herself a scotch with trembling hands. She'd heard rumors about Matteo's guardian. Rumors she dismissed as urban legends. Maybe she'd been wrong. Elena knew none of this. She taught her classes, graded papers in her tiny apartment, and tried not to check her phone every 5 minutes for threatening messages. But nothing came. No angry calls from parents. No summons to Whitmore's office. The silence was almost worse than the confrontation. On Thursday afternoon, as students filed out after the final bell, Mateo lingered behind. He approached her desk hesitantly, then held out a folded piece of paper. Elena opened it.
You're in danger because of me. I'm sorry.
Her heart clenched. Mateo, no. You have nothing to apologize for. He wrote something else. My guardian is protecting me. But he's also protecting you now. People don't say no to him. What does that mean? Mateo just looked at her with ancient eyes, eyes that had seen too much for 16 years. Then he wrote, It means you're safe. But it also means you're noticed. Be careful, Ms. Rodriguez. He left before she could respond. That evening, Elena Googled Luca DeSantis for the first time. The results were sparse. A few photos from charity events, always in the background, never the focus. Articles about waterfront development that mentioned his company in passing. One old newspaper story about organized crime in the city that referred to alleged connections to traditional family structures, without naming names. And one Reddit thread titled, Is Luca DeSantis actually? The thread had been deleted. Elena closed her laptop, feeling cold despite the stuffy apartment. What had she done? She'd wanted to protect a bullied student. Instead, she'd somehow become entangled with a man whose very name made people delete their questions. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her hands shook as she opened the text. The 3 families are scrambling. They don't know who's hitting them yet, but they will soon. When they do, they'll blame you. Stay alert. LD. Elena stared at the message. Luca was destroying these people's livelihoods. For Mateo. And apparently for her. She should have felt grateful. Protected. Instead, she felt terrified. Because she understood now what Mateo had been trying to tell her. Luca's protection wasn't free. It came with a price she hadn't agreed to pay. She was valuable to him now, which meant she was trapped. Elena looked at Luca's business card, still sitting on her kitchen counter where she'd left it 2 days ago. The embossed numbers seemed to glow in the dim light. Outside her window, a dark sedan was parked across the street. It hadn't been there this morning. Elena turned off the lights and sat in the darkness, wondering if she'd saved Mateo or simply traded one cage for another. And somewhere across the city, in an office with a view of the harbor, Luca DeSantis made another phone call. The quiet war had only just begun. The email arrived at 6:47 a.m. on Friday morning. Ms. Rodriguez, you are hereby notified of a disciplinary hearing scheduled for 3 p.m. today regarding violations of professional conduct, including defamation of students, insubordination, and creating a hostile learning environment. Your employment status will be determined at this hearing. You may bring representation. Roosevelt Preparatory Academy Board of Directors. Elena read it 3 times, her coffee growing cold in her hand. They were firing her.
Today.
She'd known retaliation was coming, but 24 hours notice? That wasn't a hearing, it was an execution. Her hands shook as she called the teachers' union. The representative sounded sympathetic but helpless. Elena, with this short notice, I can't get anyone there by 3. The earliest we could contest this is next week, but by then I'll be unemployed. I'm sorry. These private schools have flexibility that public schools don't. If you had tenure. I'm in my 2nd year. A heavy sigh. Document everything. Record the hearing if you can. We'll fight the wrongful termination after. But today you're on your own. Elena hung up and stared at her reflection in the dark TV screen. She looked exhausted. Defeated. But she wasn't defeated yet. She dressed in her best suit, the one she'd worn to her job interview 2 years ago. She printed every piece of evidence she'd collected. She prepared her defense like she was going to war. Because she was. The school day crawled by. Students whispered as she passed in hallways. Teachers avoided eye contact. Even Mateo looked worried, writing her a note during class. "What's happening?" She wrote back, "I'll be okay." But she didn't believe it. At 2:45, Elena walked into the same conference room where everything had started 3 days ago. The board sat in judgment once again, but this time lawyers flanked them. 3 men in expensive suits with briefcases full of ammunition. Elena sat alone at the opposite end. "Ms. Rodriguez," Whitmore began, his voice formal. "You understand the severity of this hearing? I understand you're trying to silence me." Mrs. Pierce's lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Kirkland, leaned forward. "Ms. Rodriguez, you've made serious and defamatory accusations against minors. You've disrupted the educational environment. You've acted in insubordination to direct orders from administration. These aren't small matters. Neither is systematic bullying of a disabled student." "Alleged bullying," Kirkland corrected, "which you've failed to prove despite making inflammatory claims that have damaged the reputations of 3 families. I have evidence. You have photos of graffiti that could have been made by anyone. You have anonymous statements from students who won't go on record. You have your interpretation of normal teenage social dynamics." He opened a folder. "What we have are statements from multiple students saying you've created a hostile classroom environment, that you've targeted specific students based on their socioeconomic status, and that you've violated school policy by contacting a parent, Mr. DeSantis, without administrative approval." Elena's stomach dropped. "I didn't contact him. He came to the meeting. After you filed a report that prompted his invitation," Mr. Chen's lawyer added. "A report you filed knowing it would cause disruption." "A report I filed because it was my legal obligation." "Your obligation," Kirkland said coldly, "is to follow the chain of command. Instead, you've embarked on a personal crusade that's caused significant harm to this institution and its donors." Dorothy Morrison leaned forward. "Ms. Rodriguez, I've served on this board for 30 years. I've seen teachers come and go. The ones who last, they understand that education isn't just about protecting every student who has a hard time adjusting. It's about maintaining standards, order, and relationships that keep this school running. So, we should let bullies run free because their parents have money? We should trust experienced administrators," Whitmore said, "not second-year teachers with hero complexes." Elena felt the room closing in. They'd prepared for this. Every argument she made, they had a counter. Every piece of evidence she presented, they dismissed. She was going to lose. "Let's vote," Mrs. Pierce said, unable to hide her satisfaction. "All in favor of terminating Ms. Rodriguez's employment effective immediately." The conference room door opened. 3 people walked in, 2 men and 1 woman, all in immaculate suits that made the board's lawyers look like they'd shopped at discount stores. The woman in front carried a leather briefcase embossed with gold letters, DeSantis Legal Group. "I apologize for the interruption," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "I'm Catherine Walsh, representing Ms. Elena Rodriguez in this matter." Elena's mouth fell open. Whitmore stood. "This is a closed hearing. You can't just..." Under the terms of Ms. Rodriguez's employment contract, she's entitled to legal representation at any disciplinary hearing. Section 47, subsection B. Catherine placed her briefcase on the table with a soft thud. "You did provide her contract, didn't you?" Silence. "No? Then I've brought copies for everyone." Her colleagues began distributing documents. "I've also brought documentation of the timeline of events, sworn statements from 14 students willing to testify about the bullying they witnessed, security footage that Principal Whitmore claimed was lost. We found it, and communications between board members discussing how to handle the Rodriguez problem before any formal complaint was filed." She smiled, and it was terrifying. "Shall we begin?" Kirkland recovered first. "Ms. Walsh, this is highly irregular. Ms. Rodriguez couldn't have retained counsel of this caliber in the past 5 hours. She didn't retain us. We're pro bono. We take cases involving civil rights violations." Catherine pulled out a chair next to Elena and sat. "Now, you were about to vote on termination? I suggest you reconsider. Because if you fire Ms. Rodriguez today, will have a wrongful termination lawsuit filed by Monday morning. And unlike this hearing, that will be very, very public. Mrs. Pierce's face went white. Mr. Chen's lawyer whispered urgently in his client's ear. Elena stared at Catherine Walsh, this elegant, powerful woman who'd appeared like a guardian angel and knew exactly who had sent her.
Luca.
This hearing will continue, Whitmore said weakly. But we'll review the new evidence and reconvene Monday morning. Excellent, Catherine stood. Ms. Rodriguez, let's go. Elena gathered her papers with numb fingers and followed the lawyers out, feeling every hostile eye burning into her back. In the parking lot, Catherine turned to her. Mr. DeSantis sends his regards. He thought you might need assistance. I can't afford. You're not paying. Consider it a favor. Catherine's expression softened slightly. You protected his family.
He protects his own.
That now includes you, Ms. Rodriguez. Elena watched the lawyers drive away in a black Mercedes and realized the cage door hadn't opened. It had just gotten bigger. Elena woke up Saturday morning to 847 notifications. Her phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand, the screen lighting up with each new alert. Facebook,
Twitter,
Instagram, email, text messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Confused and still half asleep, she opened Twitter. She was trending. Hashtag Justice for Mateo, hashtag Teacher Stands Up, hashtag Roosevelt Prep Scandal. Her hands went cold as she scrolled through tweet after tweet. Thread, a second-year teacher is being fired for defending a mute student against elite bullies. This is what's wrong with private schools. 1/15. Roosevelt Prep tried to silence Elena Rodriguez. Instead, they made her a hero. Hashtag Teacher Stands Up. Someone had leaked everything. The bullying incidents, the dismissed report, the emergency hearing, even the board's attempt to fire her yesterday. A video had gone viral, shaky phone footage of reporters crowding outside Roosevelt Prep's gates Friday afternoon, asking questions about the teacher who stood up to the board. It had 3 million views. Elena's personal Facebook photo, her smiling at a teacher appreciation dinner, was being shared across platforms with captions like "Hero Teacher" and "This is what integrity looks like." Her phone rang. A Los Angeles area code. Ms. Rodriguez? This is Melissa Chen from Good Morning America. We'd love to have you on Monday's show to discuss. Elena hung up, her heart pounding. Another call. New York. The Today Show. Then CNN.
Unfair.
Local news. National news. She turned off her phone and sat in the silence of her apartment, feeling like the walls were closing in. She'd wanted to protect one student. Now she was the face of a movement she didn't ask to lead. By Monday morning, the media circus was in full swing. Elena arrived at Roosevelt Prep to find news vans lined up along the street, satellite dishes pointing at the sky. Reporters held microphones, cameras ready. Parents dropping off students slowed down to watch the spectacle. Ms. Rodriguez, Channel 7 News. Can we ask you a few questions? Elena, is it true the board threatened you? What message do you have for other teachers facing similar situations? Elena pushed through the crowd, keeping her head down. Security guards, more than usual, formed a barrier at the entrance. She caught a glimpse of Whitmore through the front office window, his face red as he spoke urgently on the phone. Inside, the school felt different. Students stared. Some gave her thumbs up or whispered encouragement. Others looked nervous, their parents probably board members or donors. In her classroom, someone had left flowers on her desk. A card read, "Thank you for caring."
Minus derecho.
But there was also a note, scrawled in angry handwriting. "You're going to regret this." Elena crumpled it and threw it away, trying to ignore the knot in her stomach. Mateo arrived early, as always. He wrote quickly in his notebook and showed her, "I'm sorry. I never wanted this for you." "It's not your fault," Elena said firmly. "None of this is your fault." But Mateo looked haunted, like he'd seen this pattern before, people getting too close, paying the price. The day crawled by in a surreal haze. Between classes, Elena's colleagues whispered in corners. Some congratulated her. Others warned her that she'd crossed a line and should be careful. At lunch, she ate in her classroom, avoiding the faculty lounge. Through her window, she could still see news vans parked outside, reporters doing stand-ups in front of a school sign. Her phone, turned back on, showed hundreds more messages. Job offers from public schools, interview requests, marriage proposals from strangers, death threats. One email stood out, marked urgent. Ms. Rodriguez, we need to talk about your safety.
Please call
Catherine Walsh. Elena was about to dial when she noticed something outside. A black SUV with tinted windows sat across from the school, engine idling. It had been there since she'd arrived. Not a news van. Not a parent's car.
Just
watching. Her skin prickled. After final bell, Elena stayed late grading papers, waiting for the media to disperse. By 6, the news vans had left. The school was quiet, but when she finally walked to her car in the dim parking lot, that black SUV was still there. As she drove home, it followed. Elena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She took random turns, testing. The SUV stayed 3 cars back, professional and persistent. Not Luca's people. She'd seen his security. They were subtle but protective. This felt different. Predatory. At her apartment building, Elena parked and rushed inside, her keys clutched like a weapon. She ran up the stairs to her third-floor unit and locked the door behind her, heart hammering. Through her window, she watched the SUV park across the street. And stay there. Elena called the number on Catherine Walsh's card with shaking hands. Ms. Rodriguez. Catherine answered immediately. Where are you? My apartment. Someone followed me home. Black SUV?
yes.
How did you? They've been watching you since Saturday. We've had our own people monitoring the situation. Catherine's voice was calm but serious. You've become very visible very quickly, Ms. Rodriguez. That makes you valuable to people who want to understand Mr. DeSantis's interests. Elena's blood went cold. What people? Rival organizations. They see a teacher he's protecting, a boy he clearly values, and they wonder why. They wonder what makes you special. What information you might have. I don't have any information. I'm just a teacher. They don't know that. All they know is Luca DeSantis went to war over you. A pause. Mr. DeSantis wants to meet with you tomorrow. He'll explain the situation fully. I don't want to meet him. I don't want any of this. I understand. But you're already in it, whether you want to be or not. Catherine's voice softened. The car outside your apartment? They won't approach you tonight. They're just watching, gathering information. But that could change. You need protection, Ms. Rodriguez. Real protection. Elena sank onto her couch, still staring at the SUV through her window. What have I done? She whispered. You defended someone who couldn't defend himself, Catherine said quietly. In most worlds, that would make you a hero. In this world, it makes you a target. After hanging up, Elena sat in her darkening apartment, watching the SUV watch her back. Her face was on national news. Her name was trending online. Hundreds of thousands of people were calling her a hero. But heroes in movies didn't sit alone in crappy apartments, terrified of the shadows outside their windows. Heroes didn't realize too late that doing the right thing could get you killed. At midnight, a second car arrived, this one sleek and dark, parking beside the SUV. 2 men in suits stepped out and spoke briefly with whoever was inside. The SUV left. The new car stayed. Elena recognized Luca's people. She should have felt relieved. Protected. Instead, she felt like a chess piece that had accidentally moved into the center of the board, where all the big pieces were playing. And she had no idea what the rules were anymore. The cafe was nearly empty at 7 a.m. Tuesday morning. Elena sat in the back corner booth, nursing a coffee she couldn't taste. She'd barely slept, too aware of the car parked outside her building, the shadow protection that felt more like surveillance. Luca DeSantis arrived exactly on time, alone this time, dressed in a simple dark suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He ordered an espresso at the counter, exchanged brief words with the owner, who nodded nervously, then slid into the booth across from her. Up close in morning light, he looked tired. Human. "Thank you for meeting me," he said quietly. "Did I have a choice?" A slight smile. "Always. I don't force people into conversations, Ms. Rodriguez. Only outcomes." He sipped his espresso. "How are you holding up?" "I'm being followed by strangers. My face is all over the news, and I've received 14 death threats since Friday." Elena's voice was steady despite her exhaustion. How do you think I'm holding up?" "Poorly, I'd imagine. No platitudes, no false sympathy. Just acknowledgement. I owe you an explanation." "You think?" Luca folded his hands on the table. They were surprisingly unremarkable hands. No rings, no jewelry except a simple watch. "When you defended Matteo, you did something rare. Most people see injustice and look away. It's easier, safer. You looked directly at it and said no. I'm a teacher. It's my job. It's your job to educate, not to sacrifice your career, your safety, your peace of mind." His dark eyes held hers. "You made a choice. That choice has consequences." Elena leaned forward. "Consequences you created. Those families losing contracts, frozen accounts, that was you." "Yes."
No denial. No justification.
"They hurt someone under my protection," Luca continued calmly. "I responded, but I was measured. I could have done much worse." The casual way he said it made Elena's blood chill. "And now their rivals are watching me," she said. "Your lawyer told me I'm a target because people think I'm important to you. Am I important to you?" Luca was quiet for a long moment. "Matteo is my nephew. My sister's son." Elena's breath caught. The past tense hung heavy between them. "She died 3 years ago. Cancer. Before she passed, she made me promise 2 things. Keep Matteo safe, and let him have a normal life." Bitterness crept into his voice. "I've failed at both. He's been to 4 schools in 3 years. Each time, the same pattern. Kids sense he's different, vulnerable. They circle like sharks. Why is he with you? What about his father?" "Never in the picture." Luca's jaw tightened. "Matteo's doctor says his muteness is psychological, not physical. Selective mutism triggered by trauma. He watched his mother die slowly, painfully.
He was 13.
He hasn't spoken since." Elena's heart broke. She thought of Matteo's ancient eyes, that bone-deep exhaustion she'd seen in him. "The schools always promise they'll handle it," Luca continued. "But when the bullying starts, they protect the donors. The legacies. The families with influence." He met her gaze. "Until you. You were the first person who chose him over your own security. Do you understand how rare that is in my world?" "I'm not in your world." "You are now," he said it gently, but it landed like a verdict. "The moment you stood up in that board meeting, you became visible. And visibility in my world is dangerous." "Then make me invisible again," Elena said desperately. "Stop protecting me. Let this blow over." "It won't blow over. You're trending on social media. You're a symbol now. And symbols attract attention, both good and bad." Luca leaned back. "The Calabrese family has been watching my movements for months. They're looking for weaknesses, leverage. When they saw me intervene at your school, they became interested. When the media made you famous, they became very interested." The black SUV. Calabrese scouts. Testing security, seeing how close they can get. They won't hurt you, not yet. But they'll watch, follow, maybe try to approach you. Ask questions about Matteo, about me, about where my interests lie. Elena's hands trembled around her coffee cup. What do they want? Information. Leverage. In my world, knowledge is currency. Luca's voice remained calm, like he was explaining simple math. They think you're valuable to me, which makes you valuable to them. They're not wrong. I'm just a teacher. You're the woman who made me show my hand. Luca leaned forward, his intensity focused but not threatening. I stay in shadows, Ms. Rodriguez. I don't attend school board meetings. I don't send lawyers to disciplinary hearings. I certainly don't start economic wars over bullied children, even my own nephew. But you made me care more about his well-being than about staying invisible. That tells my enemies something important. What? That I'm human. That I can be moved. That there are people who matter enough to make me act against my own interests. He paused. You're one of those people now. The weight of it pressed down on Elena's chest. I didn't ask for this. No one asks for their life to change. It just does. Luca's expression softened slightly. I'm offering you a choice, Elena. May I call you Elena? She nodded numbly. I can provide protection. Real protection. Not control, not ownership, protection. You continue teaching. You live your life. But my people ensure your safety. No one approaches you. No one threatens you. You're under my umbrella. And in exchange, nothing. This isn't a transaction. He said it so simply it sounded like truth. You defended my family when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. That deserves reciprocity. Honor demands it. Elena stared at this dangerous man talking about honor like it was a tangible thing. What if I say no? Then I respect your choice. But I can't unring the bell. You're visible now, and visibility attracts attention. The Calabrese family won't stop watching just because you refuse my help. His gaze was steady. You can face this alone, or you can accept that you're already in this situation and let someone who understands it help you navigate it. Elena thought of the SUV, the death threats, the reporters, Mateo's grateful, guilty eyes. If I accept, what does that make me? Pragmatic, Luca said, and safe. She looked down at her cold coffee, at her hands that still trembled slightly. She thought of her mother's advice. Stay out of other people's business, Mija. Keep your head down. She'd never been good at keeping her head down. Okay, Elena whispered. Okay. Luca nodded once, something like respect in his expression. You won't regret this. I already do, Elena said honestly. He smiled, genuinely this time, small but real. That's how you know you're still a good person. The moment you stop regretting dealing with people like me is the moment you should worry. He stood, left cash on the table, too much for 2 coffees, and paused. Catherine will coordinate security details. You won't see them, but they'll be there. And Elena? Thank you. For everything. Then he was gone, slipping out of the cafe like smoke. Elena sat alone in the morning quiet, wondering if she'd just been saved or doomed. Maybe both. Elena arrived at Roosevelt Prep Wednesday morning to find Principal Whitmore waiting by her classroom door. Her stomach dropped. Here it comes. The firing. The real one this time. Elena, he said, his smile too wide, too forced. Do you have a moment? She unlocked her classroom, bracing herself. What is it? I wanted to personally apologize. The words came out strained, like he was chewing glass. The board has reconsidered its position regarding the disciplinary hearing. We've decided to drop all charges. Your record will reflect no misconduct. Elena stared at him. What? Furthermore, we're implementing new anti-bullying protocols. I'd like your input on the policy draft, given your experience with these matters. His eye twitched. The board recognizes that we should have handled the initial reports with more sensitivity. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. What changed? Elena asked carefully. The board had a chance to reflect on what's truly important. Whitmore's voice was robotic, rehearsed. Student welfare must come first. Always. He left before she could respond. Elena stood in her empty classroom, feeling like she'd entered an alternate dimension. By lunch, the strangeness had multiplied. Mrs. Pierce stopped her in the hallway. Mrs. Pierce, who'd threatened to sue her, who'd called her a troublemaker with a savior complex. Elena, she said warmly, as if they were old friends. I wanted to thank you for bringing the bullying issue to our attention. Madison has been struggling with her behavior lately. We've enrolled her in counseling. I hope we can work together to support all our students going forward. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Behind the pleasantness was pure terror. Of course, Elena managed. In the parking lot after school, Mr. Chen approached her car. Elena's hand instinctively moved toward her pepper spray. Ms. Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. His voice was tight. Brandon's behavior was unacceptable. We've withdrawn him from Roosevelt Prep. He's attending a military boarding school now. Structure, discipline, accountability. Things we should have provided earlier. That seems
Sudden.
Sometimes change needs to be sudden. His jaw clenched. I hope there are no hard feelings. He walked away before she could answer, his shoulders hunched like a man carrying an invisible weight. What the hell was happening? The answer came Thursday morning in the form of an email from the school's development office. Dear faculty, we're pleased to announce several major donations to Roosevelt Preparatory Academy, the Westfield Foundation, $500,000 for arts programming, the Harbor Education Initiative, $750,000 for student support services, the Tomorrow Scholars Fund, $1 million endowment for need-based scholarships. The list went on. Nearly $4 million in new funding from foundations Elena had never heard of. She forwarded the email to Catherine Walsh with one question. Is this Luca? The response came within minutes. Partially. Mr. DeSantis believes in strategic philanthropy. Others have also discovered renewed enthusiasm for education. Translation. Luca had shown these people their world could crumble, then offered them a way to rebuild, on his terms. That afternoon, Elena attended a mandatory faculty meeting. The entire board was present, sitting in a row at the front of a library. Dorothy Morrison stood to address the teachers. We're entering a new chapter at Roosevelt Prep, she announced. Recent events have reminded us that excellence means more than academic achievement. It means creating a safe, inclusive environment where every student can thrive. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her notes. To that end, we're making several changes. First, a new position, Student Advocate Coordinator, focused on supporting vulnerable students. Second, mandatory anti-bullying training for all faculty and staff. Third, an anonymous reporting system for students to report concerns without fear of retaliation. She looked directly at Elena. Ms. Rodriguez, we'd like you to lead the Student Advocate Program. You've shown extraordinary dedication to student welfare. We hope you'll accept. The room fell silent. Every teacher turned to look at Elena. This was a reward. And a warning. Accept the position. Accept the new power structure. Accept that Luca had remade the board in his image. I'd be honored, Elena said quietly. Relief rippled through the board members' faces. After the meeting, Elena walked through Roosevelt Prep's marble hallways, seeing it all with new eyes. The trophy cases, the donor plaques, the portraits of distinguished alumni. This school ran on money, on influence, on power. Before, that power had protected bullies. Now it protected Mateo. The mechanism hadn't changed. Only who controlled it. Ms. Rodriguez. Elena turned to find a young teacher named Sarah. Quiet, usually avoided confrontation, approaching nervously. I just wanted to say thank you, Sarah whispered. Last year, I tried to report a student for harassing another kid. The administration buried it. I almost quit. Her eyes were wet. You did what I couldn't. You actually made them listen. I didn't do it alone, Elena said honestly. But you started it. That matters. Sarah squeezed her arm and walked away. Elena continued down the hall, her footsteps echoing. Did it matter how change happened as long as it happened? Did the ends justify the means? She thought of Mateo, who'd smiled at her that morning, genuinely smiled for the first time since she'd met him. She thought of other vulnerable students who might now have protection. But she also thought of Mr. Chen's crushed expression, Mrs. Pierce's terrified eyes, Dorothy Morrison's trembling hands. Luca hadn't just changed the board's minds. He'd broken their power and rebuilt it around his nephew's safety. Around her safety. Was that justice? Or just a different kind of tyranny? Elena didn't have answers. But she did have a new office. The email came that evening, informing her the student advocate coordinator position came with dedicated space, budget, and authority. She also had a text from an unknown number. The board has learned its lesson. You're safe at Roosevelt Prep now. LD, safe. The word should have brought comfort. Instead, Elena thought of a golden cage. Beautiful. Secure. Still a cage. That night, from her apartment window, she watched Luca's security car parked below. Protecting her. Watching her. She was the most powerful teacher at Roosevelt Prep now. She had resources, authority, backing. And she'd never felt more trapped. But when she thought of Mateo's smile, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Maybe that's what compromise looked like in the real world. Maybe heroism wasn't about staying pure. It was about accepting complicated alliances to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Or maybe she was just telling herself that to sleep at night. Elena closed the curtains and went to bed, knowing tomorrow would bring more forced smiles from people who hated her, more security she didn't ask for, more of this strange new world she'd accidentally helped create. The board had shifted. The question was, had she shifted too? Elena stayed late at school Thursday evening, organizing her new office. The student advocate coordinator position came with a small room near the guidance counselor's suite. She'd spent hours arranging bookshelves, hanging motivational posters, creating a space where students would feel safe. By the time she finished, it was nearly 9 p.m. The school was empty, silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Her footsteps echoed as she walked through the darkened hallways toward the parking lot. Outside, the autumn air bit at her skin. The lot was empty except for her aging Honda and the janitorial staff's van. She clicked her key fob, and her car beeped in response. That's when she noticed the security car was gone. Elena's steps slowed. For the past 4 days, Luca's people had been constant, invisible but present. She'd grown accustomed to that dark sedan, always watching, always there. Now the street was empty. Her instinct screamed. She picked up her pace, reaching for her car door. Ms. Rodriguez. She spun around. 2 men stood near the school entrance, seemingly appearing from nowhere. Both wore casual clothes, jeans, jackets, but something about their posture was military precise. Controlled. "We'd like to talk to you," the taller one said, his voice friendly but firm. "Just a few minutes." Elena's hand tightened on her keys, positioning them between her fingers like a weapon. "Who are you?" "Friends. We're concerned about your situation," the shorter man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You've gotten involved with dangerous people. We're here to help." "I'm not interested." She turned toward her car, but they moved closer, not threatening, but blocking her path subtly. "You don't understand what Luca DeSantis is," the tall one continued. "The man you're trusting, the one protecting you? He's responsible for things you can't imagine. Illegal operations, violence. I need to go." "We can offer you real protection," the short one interjected. "Better protection. DeSantis has enemies, Ms. Rodriguez. You're caught in the crossfire. Come with us, we'll explain everything, get you somewhere safe." "She's not going anywhere." The voice came from behind the men. Elena's breath caught as 3 figures emerged from the shadows near the building. Luca's security team, led by a woman with short dark hair and eyes like flint. The 2 men froze. "Sophia," the tall one said carefully. "This doesn't concern you." "Everything concerning Ms. Rodriguez concerns me." Sophia moved closer, her hand resting casually near her jacket, where Elena suspected a weapon was holstered. "You need to leave.
Now."
"We're just talking." "You're attempting to intimidate someone under our protection." Sophia's voice was cold steel. "That's a problem." The tension crackled like electricity. Elena's heart hammered. These people were talking about her like she was a possession, a strategic asset. The short man looked at Elena. "You have our card. When you realize what you've gotten into, call us. We can help you disappear, start over." "Enough." Sophia stepped between them and Elena. "Leave, or this gets ugly." For a moment, nobody moved. Then the 2 men exchanged glances and backed away slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. They disappeared into a gray sedan parked down the street that Elena hadn't noticed before. As soon as they drove away, Elena's legs nearly gave out. She leaned against her car, breathing hard. "Are you all right?" Sophia asked, her demeanor shifting from dangerous to concerned. Who were they? Calabrese's family. Low-level recruiters. Sophia scanned the parking lot, checking for additional threats. They've been looking for an opening. We had to relocate briefly, suspected surveillance on our position. They moved fast. They wanted me to go with them. Elena's voice shook. They were going to take me. Not take.
Convince.
They wanted you to come willingly, feed you information about Mr. DeSantis, turn you against him. Once they had you isolated, they'd extract everything you know about Mateo, about Luca's operations, about his vulnerabilities. I don't know anything. They don't know that. Sophia gestured to her team. Marco will follow you home. I'm riding with you. We're upgrading your security as of tonight. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to scream that this was insane, that she was just a teacher. But her hands were still shaking, and those men's eyes, calculating, predatory, were burned into her memory. She unlocked her car with numb fingers. The drive home was silent. Sophia sat in the passenger seat, alert, watching every car that passed. Behind them, Marco followed in the security sedan. At Elena's apartment building, Sophia did a full sweep before allowing her inside. In Elena's small living room, she pulled out her phone. I need to report to Mr. DeSantis. No, Elena said suddenly. I need to talk to him. Directly. Sophia hesitated, then nodded and dialed. Luca answered on the second ring. Status. Calabrese attempted contact. Subject is secure but shaken. She wants to speak with you. A pause. Put her on. Sophia handed Elena the phone. Elena, Luca's voice was tense. Are you hurt? No, Her voice cracked. What is happening? Who are those people? What do they want with me? They want leverage. Information. A way to hurt me, he sighed heavily. I'm sorry. We had a surveillance gap. It won't happen again. This is insane. Elena's fear transformed into anger. I'm a teacher. I defended a bullied student. How did that turn into men trying to kidnap me in a parking lot? Because in my world, kindness is rare. When someone shows genuine care for my family, my enemies assume there's a deeper connection, a weakness they can exploit. His voice softened. You're right. This is insane. It's also reality now. I can't live like this. I know. Silence stretched between them. I'm coming to you. We need to talk about next steps. Really talk, not just me telling you to accept protection. You deserve to understand everything. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up before she could respond. Elena handed the phone back to Sophia and sank onto her couch. Her new office at school felt like a lifetime ago. The pride she'd felt organizing it, imagining helping students, it all seemed so naive now. It gets easier, Sophia said quietly. Living like this. Being vigilant. You adjust. I don't want to adjust. I want my boring life back. Then you shouldn't have been brave. Sophia's expression was sympathetic but honest. Courage has consequences, Ms. Rodriguez. You're learning that the hard way. Elena thought of Mateo. His smile that morning. The way other students had started sitting with him at lunch, now that the bullies were gone. She thought of Sarah, the young teacher who'd thanked her for speaking up. She thought of all the vulnerable students who might benefit from the new policies, the advocacy program. Was it worth it? She asked. Being brave. Sophia considered the question seriously. Ask me again when you've survived what comes next. Not if. When. Elena closed her eyes, waiting for Luca to arrive, knowing this conversation would change everything again. Outside her window, more security cars arrived, forming a perimeter. Her building was now a fortress. She was protected. She was trapped. And somewhere in the city, rival families were planning their next move, adjusting their strategies, looking for weaknesses. Elena had become a piece on a chessboard she didn't know how to play. The only question was, Would she learn the rules fast enough to survive? Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Elena dressed in her best suit again, the same one from the first hearing, but this time she wasn't facing it alone. Catherine Walsh had called Sunday night with detailed instructions. Say nothing unless directly asked, let the lawyers handle everything, and above all, stay calm. Easy to say, impossible to do. The conference room was packed. The entire board, their lawyers, Principal Whitmore, and now, surprisingly, several reporters allowed in to observe. The viral attention had made this hearing too public to hide. Elena sat with Catherine and her team on one side of the table. Across from them, the bully's parents looked noticeably different. Mr. Chen's expensive suit couldn't hide the exhaustion in his face. Mrs. Pierce's designer outfit seemed slightly less polished, her makeup unable to cover the stress lines. Dorothy Morrison sat stiffly, her jaw tight. The reshaped board included 3 new faces, members who'd been appointed after sudden resignations the previous week. They watched the proceedings with careful neutrality. Board Chair Thomas Whitfield, one of the new appointees, called the hearing to order. We're here to address the disciplinary matter regarding Ms. Elena Rodriguez and related complaints of student misconduct. Ms. Walsh, you have the floor. Catherine stood, commanding the room effortlessly. Thank you. We're here today because Roosevelt Preparatory Academy failed in its most basic duty, protecting students. We're here because when Ms. Rodriguez tried to do what the administration wouldn't, she was threatened with termination. She nodded to her colleague, who began distributing thick folders. What you're receiving is a comprehensive timeline of events, supported by documentary evidence, witness testimony, and security footage that was allegedly lost but has since been recovered. Whitmore shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Catherine pressed a remote, and the projector screen came to life. Let's start with October 8th, Matteo Rossi's first day at Roosevelt Prep. The screen showed security footage of Matteo walking through the hallway. 3 students, Brandon, Madison, and Tyler, deliberately blocking his path, laughing as he tried to walk around them. October 9th, another video. Brandon knocking books from Matteo's hands in the cafeteria. October 10th, Madison and Tyler cornering Matteo near the lockers, their body language aggressive while Matteo stood frozen. Elena watched the board members' faces. Several looked uncomfortable. The new appointees took careful notes. Now, let's review what happened when Ms. Rodriguez reported these incidents. Catherine displayed the email chain. Her initial report to Principal Whitmore, time-stamped 3:47 p.m. on October 10th. Principal Whitmore's response, filed away with no action, no investigation, no contact with the students involved. Whitmore cleared his throat. Those were preliminary observations. I intended to. You intended to ignore it, Catherine interrupted, because Ms. Rodriguez's next email, sent 2 days later after additional incidents, was also filed away. No response. No action. She clicked to the next slide. What had happened was this. A meeting between Principal Whitmore, Mr. Chun, Mrs. Pierce, and Mrs. Morrison on October 12th. Minutes from that meeting, obtained through a records request, show you discussed the Rodriguez problem and how to manage her concerns without upsetting major donors. The room went silent. Mr. Chen's lawyer stood. Those minutes are taken out of context. Are they? Catherine pulled out another document. Because we also have text messages between board members discussing how to neutralize the situation before it spreads. Mrs. Pierce, you texted Mrs. Morrison. We need to shut this down. These allegations could damage our families. Would you like to explain what you meant by shut this down? Mrs. Pierce's face went white. I was concerned about false accusations. False. Catherine's voice sharpened. Let's hear from actual witnesses then. For the next hour, students testified via recorded video depositions. 14 students, their faces blurred for privacy, describing what they'd witnessed. The harassment, the intimidation, the way teachers looked away. How everyone knew but nobody helped, until Ms. Rodriguez. One girl, her voice shaking, said, I wanted to help Matteo, but I was scared. My parents said not to get involved with those families, but Ms. Rodriguez wasn't scared. She stood up when none of us could. Elena felt tears threatening, but blinked them back. Then came the desk photograph, the word freak carved into Mateo's desk. Catherine had it forensically analyzed. The carving matches Brandon Chen's handwriting style and was made with a specific type of pocketknife. A knife that Brandon posted on his Instagram 3 weeks ago. Mr. Chen stood abruptly. My son made a mistake. Boys do stupid things. Your son engaged in systematic harassment of a disabled student, Catherine countered. And when it was reported, you used your influence to bury it. You threatened the teacher, who tried to help. You're not upset about your son's behavior. You're upset about being caught. The room erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. New board members exchanged significant glances. Whitfield banged the gavel. Order. Everyone sit down. When quiet returned, Catherine delivered her closing argument. Ms. Rodriguez did exactly what every teacher should do. She protected a vulnerable student. For that, she faced harassment, threats, and attempted termination. The question before this board is simple. Does Roosevelt Prep stand for excellence and integrity, or does it stand for protecting privilege at any cost? She sat down, and the silence was deafening. Whitfield cleared his throat. We'll now vote on the original disciplinary charges against Ms. Rodriguez. All in favor of dismissing all charges and clearing her record? Every new board member raised their hand. Then, reluctantly, 2 original members. Then another. Unanimous. Elena's breath caught. Next vote. Whitfield continued. All in favor of launching a formal investigation into the bullying incidents and the administration's handling of the reports. Again unanimous. Finally, disciplinary action for the students involved. Brandon Chen, Madison Pierce, and Tyler Morrison are hereby suspended pending a full review. If evidence supports the allegations, expulsion will be considered. Mrs. Pierce gasped. Mr. Chen's face turned red. Dorothy Morrison just closed her eyes, defeated. This hearing is adjourned. The reporters rushed out to file their stories. The board members filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact. The bullies' parents gathered in a corner, their lawyers speaking urgently. Elena sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. You won, Catherine said quietly, packing up her files. Congratulations. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like watching a machine operate, efficient, effective, impersonal. Luca's machine. As Elena left the building, she found him waiting by a car outside. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate. Justice was served, he said simply. Was it? Elena asked. Or did you just rearrange the board until you got the outcome you wanted? Does it matter? Mateo is safe. You're vindicated. The bullies face consequences. He studied her face. You wanted them held accountable. They are. I wanted the system to work, not to be rebuilt around your influence. The system never worked, Elena. It just worked for different people. Luca's voice was patient. Now it works for people who deserve protection, including you. Elena looked back at Roosevelt Prep's pristine facade. Inside, change was happening, real change that would help vulnerable students. But it had come through power plays and intimidation, not genuine reform. Was that enough? Could she live with that compromise? Thank you, she said finally, because whatever else was true, Mateo was safe now. Luca nodded and drove away, leaving Elena standing in the autumn sunlight, wondering if justice achieved through questionable means was still justice. She didn't have an answer. But she did have her job, her dignity, and the knowledge that one student was safer because she'd refused to look away. Maybe that would have to be enough. The news broke within an hour. Teacher vindicated in landmark bullying case. Roosevelt Prep Board votes unanimously to clear accused teacher. Elite student suspended after evidence reveals systematic harassment. By Tuesday afternoon, Elena's phone was exploding again, but this time, the messages were different. You're a hero. Thank you for standing up for what's right. My daughter says you changed everything at Roosevelt Prep. The school parking lot that afternoon looked like a victory rally. Parents stopped her to shake her hand, to thank her, to share stories about their own children who'd been bullied and ignored. Ms. Rodriguez, I just wanted to say, a mother with tears in her eyes gripped Elena's hand. My son has anxiety. He's been terrified of those kids since freshman year. For the first time, he actually wants to go to school. Thank you. Elena didn't know what to say. I just did what was right. And that's rare, the woman replied. Inside the school, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Students who'd previously avoided Mateo now smiled at him in hallways. Some even sat with him at lunch, using their phones to translate questions into text so he could respond in his notebook. Elena watched from across the cafeteria as Mateo, quiet, isolated Mateo, sat surrounded by 4 other students, all laughing at something he'd written. His face was brighter than she'd ever seen it. That, at least, felt like a genuine victory. The bullies' families weren't faring as well. By Wednesday, the fallout had intensified. Mr. Chun released a public statement. Our family deeply regrets the pain caused to Matteo Rossi and his family. Brandon is receiving counseling, and we support the school's decision. We're committed to learning from this and doing better. The statement was carefully crafted by lawyers, every word measured. But social media wasn't buying it. Too little, too late. Only sorry because they got caught. Rich families think they can buy their way out of consequences. Mrs. Pierce had disappeared from public view entirely. Her interior design firm's Instagram account, once full of luxury home photos and client testimonials, had gone dark. The comments on her last post were brutal. Dorothy Morrison resigned from the school board. Her official statement cited health reasons, but everyone knew the truth. She'd been on the wrong side of history, and her reputation was shattered. The 3 families had been untouchable for decades. Now, they were pariahs. Elena should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt hollow. These were still people, flawed, arrogant people who'd made terrible choices, but people nonetheless. Watching them be publicly destroyed was uncomfortable, even knowing they'd brought it on themselves. You're too soft, Catherine said Thursday afternoon over coffee. They'd met to discuss closing the legal case. These people tried to ruin your life. I know. But watching them suffer doesn't make me happy. That's because you're a good person, Catherine smiled slightly. It's why Luca respects you. In his world, people celebrate their enemies' destruction. You just want everyone to do better. Is that naive? Probably. But it's also admirable. The positive changes came faster than Elena expected. By Thursday, Roosevelt Prep's development office announced major new initiatives, a $2 million anonymous donation to establish the Student Advocacy and Support Fund, covering counseling services, anti-bullying programs, and resources for students with special needs. Elena knew exactly who donated, but the money was real, and the help would be real. More donations followed, not from Luca, but from parents who'd been energized by the case. Ordinary families who'd never felt like they had a voice suddenly felt empowered. The PDA tripled its membership in 1 week. Friday morning, the entire faculty attended a mandatory training on recognizing and addressing bullying. The trainer, a nationally recognized expert, opened with, "This school has an opportunity to become a model for how institutions should protect vulnerable students. You have Ms. Rodriguez to thank for forcing that conversation." Applause filled the auditorium. Elena blushed and sank lower in her seat. Principal Whitmore announced his resignation that afternoon. After much reflection, his statement read, "I've decided to pursue other opportunities. Roosevelt Prep deserves leadership that prioritizes student welfare above all else." Translation: he'd been forced out. The new interim principal, Dr. Sarah Chun, no relation to Brandon's father, called Elena to her office Monday morning. "I want you to know that things are going to be different," Dr. Chun said. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with 20 years of public school experience. The Student Advocate program isn't just window dressing. You'll have real authority, real resources. If you see a problem, I want to hear about it immediately. "Thank you," Elena said, genuinely moved. "Don't thank me. You earned this. You took on an entire power structure," and one Dr. Chin leaned forward. "But Elena, I need to ask, are you prepared for what comes next? Being the face of this change. I'm not trying to be the face of anything. I just want to teach. I know. But like it or not, you're a symbol now. Students look up to you. Parents trust you. That's a responsibility. Elena nodded slowly. I understand. Good. Now, let's make sure we're worthy of the second chance your courage gave this school. That evening, Elena sat in her new office, fully furnished now, with comfortable chairs for students, educational resources, and a small sign on the door. Student Advocate, Ms. Rodriguez. All are welcome. 3 students had already come to see her that day. One about a learning disability he was embarrassed to discuss with his parents. Another about feeling excluded from friend groups. The third just wanted to talk to someone who'd listen. Elena had listened, really listened, and helped where she could. This was why she'd become a teacher. Not for fame or recognition, but for these quiet moments of connection where she could make a small difference in a young person's life. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I saw the news. You changed my life. Thank you. Former student. Then another. My daughter says you're her hero. And another. The world needs more teachers like you. Elena read them all, feeling both humbled and overwhelmed. She wasn't a hero. She was just someone who couldn't stand by and watch injustice happen. But maybe that's what heroism actually was. Not grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices, but ordinary people refusing to look away when it mattered. Outside her window, the autumn sun set over Roosevelt Prep's campus. Students walked to the parking lot, laughing and talking. Among them, she spotted Mateo, walking beside 2 other students, gesturing animatedly with his notebook. He looked like a normal teenager having a normal conversation with friends. That image, more than any news headline or public praise, made everything worth it. Elena packed up her things and headed home, past the security car that still followed her. Some things hadn't changed, back to her small apartment that felt a little less lonely now. She'd won. Mateo was safe. The school was changing. But the cost of that victory, the compromises, the dangerous alliances, the power plays, still weighed on her conscience. She'd learned something important these past 2 weeks. Doing the right thing wasn't simple. It came with complications, consequences, and moral gray areas that teachers' manuals never covered. But she'd do it again. For Mateo, for the students who needed protection, for the chance to make things better, she'd do it all again. Even knowing what it would cost. 3 weeks after the hearing, Elena arrived at Roosevelt Prep to find subtle changes everywhere. The security guard at the front gate was new, not the elderly Mr. Patterson who'd worked there for years, but a younger man with alert eyes and the posture of someone with military training. He smiled politely as Elena showed her ID, but she noticed the way his gaze swept the parking lot, cataloging every vehicle. Inside, 2 new maintenance staff worked near the entrances. They wore the school uniform, carried cleaning supplies, but moved with the same controlled precision as the gate guard. Luca's people. Everywhere. Invisible to most, but Elena had learned to spot them. She should have felt safer. Instead, she felt watched. Morning, Elena. She turned to find Marcus, a veteran history teacher, approaching with his usual coffee. But his smile seemed forced, his posture stiff. Morning, Marcus. Big day today, huh? The new anti-bullying assembly. He shifted his weight. Dr. Chen wants you to speak. Share your experience. I heard. An awkward silence stretched between them. Marcus had been friendly before. They'd eaten lunch together, complained about grading together. Now he looked at her like she was made of glass. Or dynamite. Well, I should. He gestured vaguely toward his classroom. See you later. He hurried away before she could respond. Elena sighed. This was her new reality. Respect mixed with fear. Admiration mixed with unease. Everyone knew she'd won against the board. Everyone knew powerful people had made it happen. And everyone was terrified of ending up on the wrong side of that power. In her student advocate office, Elena reviewed the week's appointments. 7 students had requested meetings, double last week's number. Word was spreading that her office was a safe space, that she actually listened, actually helped. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Mateo entered, holding his notebook. He looked different than he had 4 weeks ago. He'd gained weight, probably eating actual lunches instead of hiding in bathrooms. His posture was straighter. His eyes, while still serious, held light instead of just exhaustion. He wrote quickly and showed her. "Can I help with the assembly today?" Elena's eyebrows rose. "You want to participate?" He nodded, then wrote, "I want people to see that things can get better. That speaking up matters." He paused, then added, "You showed me that." Emotion tightened Elena's throat. "Mateo, you don't have to." "I want to." His dark eyes were determined. "I can't speak, but I can write. I can show what changed." Elena studied this brave kid who'd been so broken a month ago. "Okay, let's plan something together." For the next hour, they worked on a presentation. Mateo would display his written experiences on slides while Elena narrated. Before and after. What bullying felt like. What safety felt like. As they worked, Mateo wrote something that wasn't for the presentation. "My uncle talks about you." Elena's hands stilled on her keyboard. "Oh. He says you're the bravest person he knows. That you stood up without expecting anything back." Mateo looked at her seriously.
He's not used to that.
"Your uncle has done a lot for us," Elena said carefully. "He's done a lot for me," Mateo wrote. "Because of you. You made him see I needed more than just protection. I needed someone to care." Elena's vision blurred. "I do care, Mateo. You're a good kid who deserved better." He smiled, genuinely smiled, and returned to the presentation. The assembly that afternoon filled the auditorium. All students, grades September 12th, Saturday in sections by class. Faculty lined the walls. Dr. Chen stood at the podium, speaking about the school's commitment to change. "We failed one of our students," she said bluntly. "We allowed harassment to continue because it was easier than confronting difficult truths. That ends now. Today, we hear from someone who refused to accept that failure, Ms. Rodriguez." Applause filled the auditorium. Genuine, enthusiastic applause. Elena walked to the stage, her heart pounding. She spoke about recognizing bullying, about the importance of intervention, about creating a culture where everyone felt safe. Her words were simple but honest. Then she invited Mateo up. The auditorium went silent as he approached, many students seeing him truly for the first time. He stood beside Elena as the presentation began. His words appeared on the screen behind them. "My name is Mateo. I can't speak, but I have things to say. I've been to 4 schools in 3 years. Each time, I hoped it would be different. Each time, the bullying started within weeks. I learned to expect it, to accept it, to believe I deserved it. Then I came to Roosevelt Prep, and Ms. Rodriguez saw what was happening. She didn't ignore it. She didn't tell me to toughen up. She stood up for me when I couldn't stand up for myself. Because of her, I'm not afraid anymore. I have friends now. I eat lunch in the cafeteria. I smile." The final slide showed 2 photos side by side. Mateo on his first day, hunched and isolated, and Mateo from yesterday, laughing with 3 other students. The caption read, "This is what caring looks like. Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Thank you to everyone who chooses to see,
To help. To care.
The auditorium erupted in applause. Students stood. Teachers clapped. Some people were crying. Elena looked at Mateo, this remarkable kid who'd found his voice through silence, and felt overwhelming pride. After the assembly, students swarmed Mateo, not to mock or intimidate, but to support. They asked how to communicate with him better. They invited him to sit with them. They treated him like he mattered. Because now they understood. He did matter. Elena watched from the side of the auditorium as Dr. Chen approached. "That was powerful," the principal said. "You've changed the culture here in 1 month, Elena. That's remarkable. It wasn't just me."
No. But you started it.
You refuse to let injustice stand, Dr. Chen paused. I know some faculty are uncomfortable with the attention you've received, with the power that's aligned behind you. I didn't ask for any of that. I know. But it exists anyway. Dr. Chen's expression was thoughtful. Use it wisely. You have influence now, real influence. That's a gift and a burden. As Dr. Chen walked away, Elena spotted Sophia, Luca's head of security, standing near the exit. She gave Elena a subtle nod, acknowledging, watching, protecting. Always watching. Elena's colleague Sarah approached nervously. That was beautiful. What you and Mateo did, she lowered her voice. Some teachers are saying you have special protection, that nobody can touch you now. Sarah. I think it's good, Sarah interrupted. Someone needs to have the power to protect students instead of donors. I'm glad it's you. She walked away before Elena could respond. Elena gathered her materials and headed back to her office. The security guard, the new one, opened the door for her with a respectful nod. Her phone buzzed. A text from Luca. I watched the live stream. You're teaching him it's safe to be visible.
Thank you.
Elena didn't respond. What could she say? That she was grateful for his protection but terrified of its implications? That she'd created something good but couldn't shake the feeling she'd sold something important in the process. She looked at her office, at the students' thank you notes pinned to her bulletin board, at the schedule full of appointments with kids who needed help. This was real. The good she was doing was real. Even if the power structure that enabled it was complicated, even if colleagues feared her, even if she'd allied with someone dangerous to protect someone innocent. Mateo appeared in her doorway, holding his notebook. Want to get lunch? Some kids invited me to their table. Thought you might want to see. Elena smiled. I'd love to. They walked to the cafeteria together, past security that protected them both, through hallways where students now smiled instead of whispered, into a future that felt safer but infinitely more complex than the one she'd imagined. And for now, watching Mateo laugh silently at a table full of friends, that would have to be enough. 1 month after the hearing, Dr. Chen called Elena into her office. I have a proposal, the principal said, gesturing for Elena to sit. The student advocate coordinator position has exceeded every expectation. You've helped 17 students in 4 weeks. You've created protocols that actually work. Parents are requesting you specifically. Thank you, but I want to make it official.
Full-time.
You'd split your schedule, 2 classes teaching English, the rest dedicated to advocacy. We'd expand your office, give you a real budget, hire an assistant. Dr. Chen leaned forward. This wouldn't be a temporary role, Elena. It would be your career. Building something that lasts beyond one student, beyond one incident. Elena's breath caught. She'd loved teaching literature, loved those moments when Shakespeare's words clicked for a struggling student. But the advocacy work, helping kids navigate bullying, discrimination, anxiety, all the challenges that kept them from learning, felt more essential somehow. What about my current students? We'll transition them after this semester. You'll still teach, just less. Your real work is protecting the vulnerable, Dr. Chen smiled. You're good at it, Elena. Better than anyone I've seen. Don't waste that gift. Elena thought of Mateo, now thriving. Of the quiet girl with anxiety who'd finally told her parents about her struggles. Of the boy who'd been too ashamed to ask for learning disability accommodations until Elena helped him understand it wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. Yes, she said. I accept. Dr. Chen extended her hand. Then welcome to the next chapter of your life. That afternoon, Elena sat in her office updating student files when Mateo appeared. He developed a habit of stopping by after school, sometimes to talk about his day through writing, sometimes just to sit in comfortable silence. Today, he looked serious. He wrote carefully. Uncle Luca wants to talk to you. Outside. Elena's stomach tightened. She hadn't seen Luca since the hearing, though his presence, his protection, his influence surrounded her constantly. Is something wrong?
No.
He just wants to say something. In person. Elena saved her work and followed Mateo through the hallways. Students called out greetings to both of them. Matteo was popular now, genuinely liked rather than feared or pitted. He'd found his place. Outside the main gates, a familiar black car idled. Luca stood beside it, hands in his pockets, looking relaxed but alert. When he saw them, something in his expression softened. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said formally. "Thank you for meeting me. Mr. DeSantis." Matteo wrote something and showed his uncle. "I'll wait inside." "No," Luca said quietly. "Stay. This concerns you too." Matteo positioned himself between them, curious. Luca turned to Elena, and for the first time, she saw something vulnerable in his eyes. "I came to say thank you and goodbye." Elena's eyebrows rose. "Goodbye?" "Matteo is safe here now. Truly safe. He has friends, advocates, a school that actually protects him." Luca glanced at his nephew with unmistakable pride. "He doesn't need me hovering anymore. Neither do you. The security will remain for another month, then gradually withdraw. You've become part of Roosevelt prep structure now. Dr. Chun protects you. The new board respects you. You don't need my shadow anymore," he smiled slightly. "You've earned your own power, Elena. The kind that comes from integrity, not intimidation." Elena didn't know what to say. For weeks, she'd felt trapped by his protection, uncomfortable with the alliance. Now that he was offering freedom, she felt strangely unmoored. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," she admitted.
You started it.
"I just adjusted the playing field." Luca's expression grew serious. "You taught me something important. I've spent years protecting Matteo, through controlling his environment, eliminating threats, building walls. You protected him by believing in him, by showing him people could care without wanting something in return." He turned to Matteo. "She gave you what I couldn't, hope that the world could be good." Matteo's eyes glistened. He wrote quickly, "You both saved me.
Different ways.
Both necessary." Luca pulled his nephew into a brief, tight hug, a gesture so human, so normal, that Elena had to look away. When they separated, Luca extended his hand to Elena. "Thank you for defending my family, for being brave when it would have been easier to look away." Elena shook his hand, feeling the weight of everything unspoken between them. "Take care of him, always. But I think he's learned to take care of himself now. Thanks to you." Luca climbed into his car. Before closing the door, he gave Elena one final nod, respect, gratitude, and something like approval all contained in that simple gesture. Then he drove away. Elena and Matteo stood at the gates, watching the car disappear into afternoon traffic. Around them, students streamed out of school, laughing and talking, living normal teenage lives. "You okay?" Elena asked. Matteo wrote, "Better than okay. Ready." "Ready for what?" "For everything. Normal life.
Friends.
Future." He paused, then added, "You gave me that. Gave both of us that." They walked back toward the school building. Inside, Elena's office waited, full of appointments, student concerns, problems she could actually solve now. She had authority, resources, respect. Her courage hadn't just protected one boy. It had shifted the entire power structure of Roosevelt Prep. What used to protect wealth and privilege now protected vulnerability and need. It wasn't a perfect system. Power was still power, with all its complications. But at least now it served the right people. As Elena held the door for Matteo, she glimpsed her reflection in the glass. She looked different than she had 6 weeks ago. Older, maybe. Definitely more certain. She'd learned something crucial. Doing the right thing was messy. It required uncomfortable compromises, strange alliances, and accepting that change rarely came through pure means. But it was still worth doing. Matteo touched her arm and showed her his notebook one last time. "Thank you for seeing me. For seeing all of us." Elena smiled. "That's what teachers do. We see students. All of them." They walked inside together, past the security that would gradually fade, through hallways that felt safer now, into a future neither of them could have imagined 6 weeks ago. Elena had defended a mute boy everyone bullied. She had known he was a mafia boss's heir. But in the end, that hadn't mattered. What mattered was simple. A child needed help, and she refused to look away. Everything else, the complications, the consequences, the compromises, was just the price of doing what was right. And she'd pay it again. Every time,